Hey everyone, welcome to our channel. This is Convoy of Two. We decided to come up with a new series and we're gonna call it Twisted TOS Gene. So let's start. So I'll start with thanking you for watching our walk around video. That was our very first video. And as a follow-up to that video, we would like to talk about 5 mods that we would probably take a different route if we were to do it again. Let's start with the first mod. I want to talk about Raptor liner. And while we do like the fact that we can blast through trails even if it's narrow and not worry about the scratches and brushes, but here are the problems that we see with this mod. It is difficult to wash, so there's that. When it's dented and I try to push out the dent, there are micro cracks in the Raptor liner, and now the moisture comes in. And I already spotted few places where the rust start develops, and it really takes you time to see that, and it may be too late. So if we were to do that again, we would probably go with a wrap. It is a much more expensive mod, and that was the reason we chose the Raptor line in the first place. 200 bucks. That's I think all it cost us. We did the labor ourselves, so that was the choice. But I think looking back, the self-healing wrap is well worth the investment. Mod number 2, long travel. Um, it's okay. This is everybody knows the topic. If you are building a true rock crawler, I think it's worthwhile paying all the disadvantages and problems we're about to discuss with long travel. However, if you're overlander, if you're in the beginning of your build, you should not look into that mod. Ball joints bring a lot of maintenance and challenges with it. And you need to be able to do it yourself, otherwise it will end up being a very expensive, high maintenance part of your vehicle. Uh, if you're mudding, so last time we were on a trail, there was a lot of mud, and then driving back on highways, I've noticed that the little steering corrections that you usually do, because the mud was so thick and it was all over the ball joints, it was not letting me do the small corrections, and I had to really do a little bit more. And what ended up being is that the vehicle was wandering all around the lane. I felt unsafe, and we had to stop on a gas station, and I had to lubricate all our ball joints. That did help, but this is an inconvenience. So we don't like that. Clearly, you don't have sway bars, so it is TP. The handling is not the same, and I think it's a high price to pay. CV axles, the angles are crazy, and even when you shave it, you can't really use the full potential of the long travel, and you end up upgrading those CV axles. That's an additional cost, and it is not cheap, and the maintenance is high. The weakest point in those IFS setups is the tie rod, and the longer the tie rod is, the weaker it is. And clearly, you're in our setup, it is 3.5 inch wider each side. Our tie rods are longer, and it is weaker. What we would have done if we are to choose today, we did want to build a rock crawler. So the technical capabilities are important to us, but we would have chosen a marlin crawler setup. There are a few strong advantages of this setup that makes it a better choice in our opinion. First of all, the front axle moves 2 inches forward, so your departure angle is much better. Your wheelbase is longer, which in many cases is an advantage. You can clear a bigger tire with less aggressive cut, and the bigger tire overall. I've seen setups with 40-inch tires on Marlin Crawler setup, and we are running 37s, and it's probably as crazy as we can do. I know folks running even 38 without Marlin Crawler, but I think you'll have to limit your articulation. So that is why we would have chosen Marlin Crawler. You're swapping a steering rack, so that weak point, tie rod point, is going away. or at least becoming much stronger. And yes, we are planning to swap our steering rack to Tundra rack, which will improve this setup, but I would rather go with Marlin Crawler. Also, one more point that I like about Marlin Crawler setup is the shape of the lower arms is much better and gives you a lot more ground clearance. So that's about a long travel. Our next mode is Dana 60. I know there's not a lot of rigs at the moment that are running Dana 60, but here is, so first of all, the story and why we decided to go with Dana 60. We ran through few ring and pinion setups, running 37s and towing a trailer. And, you know, I started hearing that bearing whining, and I said, okay, here's another setup that's ready to be swapped. And then we had an axle housing issue. In some spots, it rusted through. And I realized that we need to swap an axle housing and the gears. And the wheel bearing was time to do. And all this together, I think it would be probably would have cost us about $4,000, all of it, with new axle housing, new wheel bearing, new gear setup. And this is when I said, you know what? Yes, the NS60 is still more expensive, but probably it's time, and we'll stop running through those gears. So we looked at the East Coast Gear Supply side. It was $7,000. It was a little bit more, not a little bit, but more expensive, but not crazy expensive comparing to just replacing all the factory components. And we decided to do that. Well, here's the problem with that decision. Yes, the axle would have costed you 7,000 plus tax and shipping. However, it is not a real bolt-on even though advertised, because we had to replace our shocks. Our previous shocks were no longer working with this axle. We had to replace our control arms. The control arms were no longer good with this setup. And it's theoretically good, but not. I'll give you an example with the control arms. Yes, you can put your factory or other any aftermarket control arms with this axle. It will bolt on it and it will be all right. But the tube is much bigger diameter. So if you want to have a droop and you want your control arm to stay away from the axle tube, you need to come up with a different solution. And axle fabrication just came out with this banded lower links, which was a perfect solution for us. So here you go. That's another, I think, $500 shipped or something like that. All of which, and other components, the drive shaft. You need a shorter drive shaft because the pumpkin is much bigger. So now the distance between your transfer case and your differential is shorter. So you need that. Links for the sway bar, we had to replace those. Shocks I already mentioned. I think overall, the entire rear axle setup ended up costing us about $12,000, and there is no labor cost in it. We've done it ourselves with help of our friend Kai, and basically it's $12,000 in parts. Knowing that, would we have chosen Dana 60? Probably not. So we love it, but it's more expensive than it looks. Next one, Expedition 1 rear bumper. The main reason we don't like this mod is the weight. The weight is really high. It's beyond the rear axle. It's the worst place to have that weight from the weight distribution point of view. And then you run the 37s and we have all the options, so the little ladder and the jerrycan mounts. I can really feel that weight. So this is one big problem with it. Second problem, I absolutely hate the hinges. It looks cool and people love them, but if you go through mud with those hinges, the mud will go, when you go out, say from an obstacle and you grab all this mud with your rear bumper, it goes to all the little spaces and all, and fill it up with mud, you cannot open it. This is not a great solution for us. And if we were to choose today, we would have chosen a minimalistic solution. There are some good options on the market where you'll basically just carry the tire, the spare tire in the back. So realistically, it would have been half the weight and no problems. So that's about the Expedition 1 bumper. And the last one is the Radiator. So We already noticed when towing on 37s, towing the trailer, the transmission temperatures were a little higher, and we are running a transmission cooler, which helped a great deal. And then the next step was maybe improving some overall cooling capacity. So we took a trip to Arizona, and I've noticed when we were climbing in extreme heat, we're climbing on the rocks, and the coolant temperature, the engine coolant temperature, went really high. So that was a surprise. I started looking at our radiator, and I noticed that it was pretty cloggy. I couldn't clean everything out, and in some areas it was just simply damaged, all the ribs. So I imagined the airflow wasn't great. And I said, this is a good opportunity to upgrade the cooling capacity. And we went with the CSF aftermarket solution, which was supposed to be the high capacity radiator. Well, what can I say? After installing it, we're actually running higher temperatures now than we were with the defective factory unit. And we tried to troubleshoot it. I am sure we are running the right amount of oils. And it's just not cooling as great. If we were to do it again, I think just swapping with the new OEM unit would have done a much better job for us. So that's the fifth one. I have a little bonus mod that we would have done differently, and it's easy. It's the gears. We run 488s. I think with 37s and a trailer, you should really go with 529s. If we were to do it again, that would have been the gear setup we would have chosen. All right, well, I think this sums it up. These are the 5 mods. We have more that are less significant, and we understand when you're building a vehicle, it's a long process, and sometimes through the years you learn that wasn't the best mod. And what we're trying to do here is to show you folks what we don't like, and hopefully potentially save you some money. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Let us know what other videos you would like to see about this and our other builds. And watch for the next walk around videos. We have more cool rigs to show.